Hello, my listeners here for the Dreamcatcher podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today, my guest is Sheyenne Kreamer. How are you doing, Sheyenne?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being our guest. So Sheyenne, tell us a little bit about where are you located? What's going on actually in your life?
Well, my life is never boring. I am a
Okay.
full-time RV'er. Actually have two companies that we work with. So right
Wow.
now I am located in Raleigh, North Carolina,
Okay.
and we are in heavy up to our eyeballs in alligators, you might say, creating an event for suicide prevention.
Yes, yeah, and that is so. When we talked earlier before we did the podcast, what you and your husband are doing with suicide in general. But how did you um, get go towards that direction? I should say.
Well, it probably started all the way back in high school. I've actually lost three friends to suicide. One
Wow.
of them I was very concerned about in high school because he really wanted to go in directions that were more in line with the ministry.
Okay.
And lots of people were like, oh, that's not very realistic. You need to go do something else. And so he spent many years being an accountant and a tax preparer. And he actually took his life several years ago.
Yes.
So, those were my beginnings. And then
Yeah.
some good friends of ours told us about what was happening here in North Carolina with campus suicides. And we
Okay.
just got really concerned because, as we've learned over the last couple of months, we are losing far too many of our youth to suicide.
Yes. Yes. It's terrible when anybody takes their life, but especially youth. To get to that point, where you're willing to take your life. So how did you jump into this journey? How did you decide to be able to help?
Well, in relation to the suicide prevention side or just in general, because we've had
Yeah,
quite a
this,
journey for a while.
yeah, also the suicide prevention. Yes.
Sure. Well, one of the people who's going to be actually, he's going to be the moderator for our panel discussion. He is a Marine Corps veteran who has tried twice and failed to take
Wow.
his own life. And we had been talking to him about, what are societal factors that are involved in this? Because
Hmm.
everybody talks mental health, mental health, mental health.
Right.
And we know mental health is an issue, but at the same time, there is some data out there that says there's a lot of people who have never stepped into a therapist's office who
Hmm.
all of a sudden are gone. So, there was no way that people thought that this person had a mental health issue, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
Wow.
So, that's when we start questioning a little bit more deeply and going, okay, so what are the other factors? What are things that maybe we have more control over as a
Hmm.
society
Right.
than what we're thinking that we do? And so this gentleman was the one, he's actually in Virginia, and he said, well, if we were going to do a live event about suicide prevention, where would you do it? I said, well, my husband and I lived in Raleigh for 30 years.
Hmm.
We have a lot of contacts there. And
Right.
then that was also where there was a lot of publicity bubbling up about campus suicides. So
Really.
that's what brought us here. That's kind of the framework we're working with is, hey, nobody in this event is, except for one exception. I do have a mental health nurse who's going to be on the
Okay.
panel, but nobody else is a therapist. Nobody else is a counselor. We're
Right.
all people who are just looking out here and saying, let's look at this from a different perspective and figure out how can we all be part of a solution to
Yes.
disrupt this trend.
Amen. Yes. I think when we talked the other day, you were talking about with the statistics for the age, what is like the number one, the ranking of the death for the youth, and it was astounding. I don't remember what you quoted as being.
Yeah. there's two different statistics that we've been shown recently. One is here in North Carolina, and in North Carolina, suicide is the second leading cause of death of
Yeah,
10 to 18-year-olds. That
unbelievable.
is just
Man, it
mind-boggling.
is.
And then we actually received an article from a friend that said that suicide is actually the fifth leading cause of death nationwide of preteens. We're talking younger than
Yeah, I
13.
mean, they're
They're
babies.
babies.
Yeah, I mean, to get to that point, especially at that age, that's when you're supposed to be, being a kid and probably your best years of your life, or can be. I mean, I enjoyed my childhood greatly.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Gosh, I wonder. So, I wonder what has changed in our society to get that age group specifically to that point. I mean,
Well, there's really, we've been doing some research and studying on a lot of these issues, and we're kind of in a perfect storm is
okay,
how it looks to us. Because for one, everybody will admit that the pandemic had a huge effect on our younger generations.
yes, yes,
At the very time that they're learning how to socialize and communicate and be connected with other people, all of a sudden, depending on where you were, it was months to years
yep,
that you weren't allowed to
yes,
do this. And
yep,
that just takes this huge component out of our young people's lives. But then you think about cyberbullying. You
yeah.
think about, you can't shut that off.
No,
It
you
comes
can't.
at them
Yep,
24/7 in some cases. And
yes,
then, how many of our young people have taken their self-worth and pinned it on the internet and said, well, I'm
yes,
only worth something if I get lots of likes and
right.
comments and shares.
Yep, exactly.
So these are all things, not to mention, oh my goodness, let's talk about things like violent video gaming
Oh,
that
terrible.
actually desensitizes people to death in general. I
Yep.
mean, these are all things that are just creating this perfect storm around so many people. And then there's also a gentleman who's actually an MD that I was following for a while. His name is
Okay.
Dr. Daniel Siegel. And he says that in his work with young people who are having suicide ideation, that he finds a lot of them are having similar symptoms of PTSD
Oh,
as our
wow.
military veterans do. They look out here in the world and they see people fighting with each other, hating each other, angry at each other.
Wow.
I mean, God forbid if these poor young people are looking at all these crazy political ads on TV
Yeah.
right now, right?
Yeah,
Everything is hateful and
it
anger
is.
and fighting.
Yeah.
And they feel quite logically like they're sitting in the middle of a war zone.
Interesting, and I understand that. It is that way. Cheryl and I, my wife and I, were talking yesterday. It's like you don't find just general TV is all. I mean, you don't find nice shows. Cheryl and I wake up with watching Leave It to Beaver. We're still, and I like that. I like that. And there aren't really many shows like that on TV anymore. Let alone there's so many more channels than when I grew up. And I have problems. I mean, some of these programming is so early in the evening that I have problems with the murder and the violence myself. I
Hmm.
feel, I don't know, dirty. I feel it gets inside of me, and I have problems getting that out. And I can't imagine with a child, without that many years of experience of dealing with that. Um, yeah, I can. I never thought of it that way, but I can definitely see that.
Hmm.
It's just we don't. Well, I put up a post the other day. We don't seem to care about the innocence of our children anymore. They just seem to have to jump right in.
Oh my
And
goodness. Yes, yes. And they're being fed so many images that just aren't healthy for them these
uh,
days. I know we've talked about how we both are very faith-based people, and there's
yes,
a lot of places that young people go these days where they're encouraged to not even believe in God,
oh,
to think more as well, if science hasn't proven it, it can't
yeah,
possibly
yeah,
exist. And that to me is a huge part, is if our young people are not
Yes.
able to feel that connection to something higher than themselves, then absolutely they spend far too much time feeling alone.
Yeah, and that's so sad. And I can't imagine not having God in my life, or all that.
Mhm.
I mean, I talk to God just about daily, pretty much.
Me
Uh,
too.
and it's like I get my direction and everything else and what I should do for the day. And
Hmm.
He has never let me down, and I can't imagine not having that. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I grew up when I did. I think I'm pretty
Yes.
sure I'm glad I did. For the, I mean, this what we're doing here is awesome technology, but like anything, I guess it has good and bad. But the bad is not being really controlled. It just seems to be like free for all, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
I and that just makes me want to do more podcasts to help kids. I help everybody, but I mean, it just makes me want to tear up when kids are that way and they feel that way. That's
Yeah,
so sad.
it is.
Um,
It
I
is.
can't imagine. I have never felt that way, thankfully.
Mm.
And but so your event that you have coming up, what day is your event that's coming up, and is this the first one or?
Well, it is the first in what I expect will become many. That's one of the reasons we are full-time RVers, because it's pretty easy to pick up and move to another
Yes.
area and work on putting something like this together. So,
Yes.
but this one is on September 21st. It's a Saturday, and
Yeah.
it's an all-day event. And the first part of it is going to be live stream. So it
Oh, wow,
doesn't
okay.
matter where somebody is seeing this podcast from. If you're interested in the topic, if you're interested in hearing real talk, real
Mhm.
stories of people who have either survived suicide or they've been touched by it in some way with a family member, a friend,
Yes.
something of that nature, then this podcast is really going to be uplifting, because it's all about people who have figured out ways to redirect their lives, to find new purpose, to find new meaning, and to be able to utilize what's happened in their life in a really positive kind of way. So that's going to be live streamed, and people can go to ignitethespark.co and be able to
Okay.
register to be able to get the link to that live stream.
Awesome.
So, the second part of the day we're calling the wellness experience, because there are so many new technologies that are being revealed every day that
Right.
can help us, but they may not be listed in the services on your health insurance policy. So there
Interesting.
are there are many things that are science backed and have been proven over and over again. And I'll give you a real world example,
Okay.
because this is something we found out about when we came back to Raleigh that we didn't even know existed. There's a nonprofit here in Raleigh called HBOT for Heroes. And
Okay.
what they do is they raise funds to be able to get veterans free treatments in hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Wow.
Most people have never even heard of
I haven't.
hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You're not going to see it listed in your services and medical insurance.
Right.
But here in Raleigh, they have a track record now of over 200 veterans that, using this therapy, which is basically just putting you in a pressurized environment and having you breathe oxygen, pure oxygen, for an hour at a time, they have gotten 200 vets off from PTSD meds.
Wow. That's amazing.
It
Oh my
is.
gosh. Definitely need
It
to spread the word on that. I
Yeah,
mean,
and that's an example of the kinds of things that people are going to be able to come in and learn about
okay.
and experience different things, and just find out, what is it that maybe we don't know that we don't know, because
Yes.
you know I believe that the good Lord put a lot of things on this planet to help us heal body, mind, and spirit
Amen.
that a lot of people don't ever get to learn about.
Yeah. And I love that. That is, we do, we all, everybody, we all, anything we learn that we assume that everybody else knows, we need to let other people know. Because I assume it's like, I didn't know that. It's like, okay. So okay, this is awesome. And this is an all day event?
It is. And actually there's even a third component because
Okay.
it, because my husband and I say, hey, we're here to put God back into society.
Yes.
So that's part of our mission. It is a core piece of the mission. When you look around at everything we've talked about already today, it's largely because God's been yanked out of everything
Yeah, that's for
that
sure.
we
Yes.
have this chaos going on.
Yep.
And so the third part we're calling Spark in the Park.
Okay.
And we're inviting faith-based people of all kinds to come together in Raleigh's major park called Dorothea Dix Park. It
Okay.
used to be the site of our state mental health hospital,
Oh, really?
but
Okay.
it's now that's been moved and now the park is there. And so we're saying, okay, if you believe in the creator like we do, then come on out because we're going to do some asking for help for one. You know, as
Cool.
humans, we're
Yes.
not doing a very good job of solving this problem. So
Mhm.
perhaps we could use some intervention here.
Yes.
So we're
Yes.
going to definitely come together and say, okay, God, we are humbly here. We're asking for your help. Show us, inspire us, give us the tools and ideas where we all can become part of the solution for
Yes.
interrupting this suicide epidemic, is what it
Yeah,
really
he
is.
is.
So,
Yeah.
you know, that's part of it. But then we also are going to have a visioning kind of component to
Okay.
this because we have actually identified people who have these incredible visions that we believe are divinely inspired to be able to start to create micro communities that will allow people to come in there and heal again, body, mind, and spirit
Yes.
together and help to again disrupt this horrible trend.
Yes.
So you know the Bible tells us that you know people are destroyed for lack of vision, so we're going to give people some vision to be able to focus on and again ask for help together on how can we start building these micro communities.
That is so awesome, so cool. Every other word I can think. That is so great. I mean, I love that. I just, I'm so glad that you got this inspiration to do this. I mean, I have to ask, what did you do before when you lived in Raleigh for those 30 years?
Well, my husband and I have done a lot of different things while we
Okay.
were here in Raleigh because my husband actually, he spent many years doing office equipment sales and service. He had
Okay.
his own company. He did very well with it, but some health issues kind of made him decide he needed to let go of it. We tried
Okay.
to sell it. It didn't work quite the way we thought, and we
Mm-hmm.
weren't prepared financially for that.
Yeah.
But we, you know, we learned a lot out of that experience. And it
Yes.
was that experience that kind of brought us to this very humble space of saying, you know what, we're seeing all these different systems out here that are not really serving people the way they should.
Okay.
And believe it or not, my husband, we didn't have two nickels to rub together to do this, but my husband was very brave and decided to run for governor of North
Oh, that's cool.
Carolina as an independent candidate.
Love
And
that.
we learned so much about the belly of that beast.
Oh, I
And we
bet.
said, you know what? It doesn't look like we can fix anything from inside a very broken system. So
Yes.
let's hit the road. Let's start working on building our own foundation for creating new systems and putting God back into those.
Amen. Oh, I love that. So, and I can't even imagine running for governor with that. Oh my gosh. I just, yeah, talk about a broken system. Oh my word.
we
I'm
we actually wrote a book called Skip the Politics and Create Heaven on Earth. We really feel like you have to ignore the political scene altogether if you want heaven on earth.
I would, yes. I even not knowing what all you went through, I would have to definitely agree with that. So where can I mean, can I buy your book?
You can absolutely.
Awesome.
Uh, there is a page for being able to do that. It's kind of a long domain. I haven't purchased a separate domain name
It's
for it.
cool.
Perhaps it's time that I should do that.
I can very much understand all that. Yes, I've got some of those things too. So, my gosh, I mean, so you're in an RV doing all this. Was RVing something you always wanted to do? Was that one of your dreams?
Well, it was. We didn't really know that it was going to end up being something that we did for a higher cause.
uh,
But when our kids were young, we went camping all the time. I
oh
mean, we
wow,
had
okay, cool.
pop-up campers when the kids were young, and we took them
Yes.
all up and down the East Coast.
Uh huh.
And And I truly believe that's why our kids, our two sons, they're adults now, but they are
Okay.
extremely good friends. And at least a couple of times a year, they go hiking in the mountains together and camp out,
Yep.
hanging
Nothing like
hammocks in
that.
the
Yes.
trees and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
I love doing that.
So, it was a wonderful family thing all along. And the more we did that, the more we kept saying, it might be interesting just to see what would happen if we just, skipped having a permanent
Yeah.
address
Yeah.
and just went out here. So yeah,
Okay.
after we kind of went through the losing all kinds of stuff in our life materially, we kind of went, well, okay. In fact, we asked when we lost our home to foreclosure, we were like, okay, God, should we be fighting to hold this? And the message that kept coming back was, you're going on the road for me. So we
Oh,
let it
I love it. Oh, yes, that is so so cool. Kind of the same way with the podcast. He's like, "You're doing the podcast for me," and that is, I mean, gosh. So, how far have you traveled with your RV?
I'm not sure what the total number of miles have been. We've done a lot that have gone back and forth between about Virginia and Florida. We tend
Okay.
to spend Florida winters in Florida
I
for
do not blame
obvious
you on that.
reasons.
I would be in Florida in the winter too. I love Florida in the winter. Yeah.
But we've been as far west as Dallas, Texas, and
Okay.
we've spent a couple of different summers in Indiana and Ohio. So that's
Nice.
about the farthest west that we've been so far. But somewhere along the line, part of what we're kind of looking for out there right now is potential sponsors, for us to really make this ignite the spark a
Right.
bigger kind of
Right.
movement across the country. If we could find that, we'll go anywhere.
I have no doubt you're going to get multiple sponsors. I'm definitely so. So when you were in Dallas, I lived in Dallas for a while. Did you do an event there?
We did not like this. No, in fact, we have a mentor in Dallas, and he's coming to our event here in Raleigh.
Cool.
So we're really grateful for that, because he's part of our story in a big way. After we went through our foreclosure experience, and my husband, was not feeling well. He actually had one hip replaced and still
Oh.
had some pain that came up from that,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden his knees got worse, his other hip got worse,
Oh wow.
and he was getting really depressed. And I said, you know what, this is not good. We're not going on the road, we're not doing anything unless we can find a way to help my husband. And I was
Right.
literally on my knees saying, okay, God, you want us on
Yeah.
the road, you better show us how to make this happen.
Yes.
And within a few days of that, I get this message through Facebook from somebody that I didn't really know. I'd just been
Mhm.
following him. And he said, Cheyenne, I don't believe we've ever met before, but I feel like I need to hear your story. Please call me.
Wow.
And this guy jumped a plane from Dallas,
Oh
flew to
wow.
Raleigh, and helped my husband in all kinds of miraculous ways to get back on his feet with almost zero pain in less than a month.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing. So
yeah,
awesome.
so it's amazing. That's why I say there's so many things. I mean, who knew that minerals could actually rebuild joints? We didn't know that,
I
but we
don't
found
believe I
out through
do
this
either.
gentleman.
No.
So, my husband now, he walks typically 5 miles a day. He has no more
Wow.
swelling in his knees. He has had no more replacements. And it's all because of mineral based nutrition. We have no minerals in our food anymore. And
True.
that's what the good Lord requires to be able to help repair our body. We've got to have minerals.
Wow. I wonder how many other people don't know that. I really didn't know that either. And that's something my wife, she suffers from that greatly, from cleaning too many houses over the years. But I think a lot of it is maybe that too. So,
Hmm.
and I love that he just out of the blue. I mean, everybody's like, "Wasn't that lucky?" It's like, no, it's never luck. It's always God.
It's
And that's
always
one thing that it's just like if you didn't have it, I just keep thinking back to those kids that have never had that. And then it's just like because we've had experiences with that with Cheryl's cancer and the bills and everything, and how it all just kind of took care of itself. It was, and we had this lady that had started the same day that Cheryl had her cancer treatment, and had the same cancer, the same stage, and she was an angel. She took, I mean, she ended up not making it, but she took care of us until the last minute. And it's just like, so what I told her was like, what were the odds of you meeting that person at that moment, you know? And then she knew that I liked vintage Christmas, and she knew her family wouldn't like it, so she's like, I have to give them all to you. And it's like, which I was honored. But there's just so many things that if once you're aware, that is just, and I love that you're doing this. I just love this. So I do have to ask before. Dreamcatcher podcast. I always ask, what were your dreams growing up when you were a child?
Wow. That's a good question. And it's funny. My earliest recollections about some of those things was I always liked playing teacher. And so now
Okay.
I've taught 10 years in a community college. I created a class called Find Your Song and Sing It, Finding and Creating Work You Love.
Yes.
I remember when I did my valedictory speech in high school, it was called Follow Your Heart. And
Awesome.
so, again, that was in response to me seeing so many of my classmates going off. I knew what was here that they
Yeah.
wanted to be doing, and
Yes.
yet they were going off to do what was logical and
Yeah.
realistic. And
Exactly.
I love my mom dearly, but if she'd had her way, she would have been pushing me down the path of electrical engineering because she was sure that was going to be the best place to make a good
Right.
income.
Yep.
Well, the only class I have never been able to get an A or a B in is electronics.
Well,
So,
okay. Okay. We're moving that such a good direction.
so
No,
there you have it. Follow your heart, I believe, has been a big calling, a big mission for me for a long time.
it
And
is. You can't
and
go
being
wrong.
out camping has always been it. So now I just camp all the time.
Yeah, hey, that sounds like a lot of win-wins there. So, and it surprises me because I kind of went that. It took me the scenic route to get where I am today, but because I did the college thing, I did the traditional, all that stuff, and oh my gosh, first job I had, it was like restaurant manager with 100-hour weeks, and it's like this is ridiculous. This is not what. But I still see, because it's been a few years ago since I graduated, just a few. And it's just like why I still see these kids getting out of high school doing exactly what I did. You would think that we would have maybe had, there's so many more options out there. You'd think we were more aware to those, but they still do. And college is so much more expensive than when I went, and I just can't imagine being burdened with that kind of debt starting out. But
Uh,
why do we still do that path so much?
well, because it was designed to create good employees, which
Yeah,
you and I may not necessarily fit that mold.
no, definitely not.
So, but here's another interesting piece for you, and this would be a conversation for another day. But
Okay,
in the research that I have done, because my husband and I have done a lot of teaching basic entrepreneur skills with young
okay,
people. We've done young entrepreneur programs. We've
nice.
had them do their own events, their own business expos where they actually took home money. And when we were researching some of the things behind that, what we ended up finding out here locally, and I've heard similar from other places, that typically there's only about a 40% graduation rate of all the young people who enter in as freshmen.
Really, that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. I guess we're meant to get the word out. That there's so much other way, and then and you need to have God in your life. It
Yes,
makes life. It makes life.
it
So
does. It
I
does.
just so okay. What do you and your husband see what you're doing now? What would you like to have it look like in maybe a couple of years, or what are your dreams for that?
We have done a lot of prototyping. People
Okay.
don't pay you much for prototyping.
No, I bet not. Yeah.
We have seriously been prototyping the foundations of the We Care Partnerships Network for 15 years. And then the Universal Soul-ution Alliance, that actually goes back even further, where we get into
Right.
teaching entrepreneurship, to folks who haven't considered it before.
Yes, yes.
So really, we're looking at Ignite the Spark as kind of our launching pad, where
Okay.
we're
Yeah.
getting a lot more publicity around this than anything we've ever done before, and we're really hoping that and praying that with the help of people like yourself, we're getting the word out here more about the We Care Partnership Network and what we're all about, because
Yes.
we're really going back to my husband's run for governor.
Okay.
One of the things that we determined was that we would be better off as a society to build localized teams of small business owners to solve problems than relying on politicians to do it.
Oh, yes. Yes. No doubt on that, because politicians don't really get anything accomplished. They're spending money.
Well, yeah, and lining their pockets
Yes.
basically
Yes.
is what it comes down to. So, so that's a big vision, is to be able to build We Care partnership teams across the country and be able to have these teams just like we're creating here. We have a team
Right.
of about 20, 25 small business owners who are all involved in Ignite the Spark, that we hope we can keep them engaged in
Right.
community-based activities here after we've moved out of Raleigh again. So that's a big piece of it. But here's the other big piece is
Okay.
Somewhere along the line, we're looking for what I would call social impact investors.
Okay.
People who would work with us to be able to start to purchase, and they don't have to be large, but start to purchase either land or already developed campgrounds / RV parks that we could start to utilize to build these micro communities. So we have a vision of having, this park is all about people going here for spiritual growth and development. This park is all about health and wellness. This park is all about entrepreneurship and prosperity. That's the big vision.
That's an
is
awesome
a
vision.
network
I
of
love that
parks.
vision. Oh, yeah, I have no doubt that'll be even bigger than you can envision right now. I mean, that is so cool. I mean, that just, yeah, and it will definitely, it's going to take on a life of its own. Praise God, by the grace of God. But it will. I have no doubt, because the world, I think the United States even more, is hungry for that kind of thing. I think that's, we're really missing that greatly. And
Yes. Yes.
and I think, I love that. Yeah, and that's one thing. If there's any way that I can help, just let me know too. I want to help you in any way I can. So,
well, you're helping today because you're helping me get the word out, and I appreciate that very much.
So when's Nebraska on your place? You're going to do one of these?
I don't know. Do you have a place we could park?
We have 5 acres here. 4 of them are pretty wooded, but we do have an acre that's pretty much open. But there's lots of areas around that. That's one thing about Nebraska; it's pretty open. So I mean, we do have. I mean, there's places where there's trees, but it's not. It's the Great Plains. It's definitely that way. So, but that would be central Nebraska. There would be. I know so many people. There would definitely be a place that we could find to do that. That would be a large space. So. No.
Well, there's, but that's part of our secret, right? When you're out here doing all this prototyping, you're not getting paid to do a lot of stuff. That's been part of how we have been able to continue to go and to move.
Right.
I mean, I'm sitting here in a church parking lot. We've been here since April.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
So the church believes that what we're doing is good for the community. They wanted to help, so they give us a spot to park. And even though we have to go, 200 feet into the woods to find the sewer tap, we actually have a very long hose that takes us there. We've got electric, we got water, and and we pay as we can.
Yeah.
to the church. So, that kind of stuff has helped us, is to be able to
Yes.
find churches, organizations, different places to be able to partner with and just say, hey,
Yes.
tell us how we can help you. And, at the same time, you can help us. So we do a lot of that kind of collaboration, I guess is a good way to put it.
Collaboration is what it's all about. Yes, I love that.
Mhm.
I love you found a church that is supportive too. And because some of these churches surprise me, it's like they surprise me. So I'll leave it at that.
I
So
understand.
it's like wow. So after this event's over, are you guys taking off on kind of a vacation?
I don't know. What's that?
I bet. Yeah.
It's funny. No, we actually back in June, because both of our sons live here in North Carolina.
Okay.
And so back in June, we actually took several days and went out to the mountains in Georgia
Oh
and
wow.
just had
Nice.
some family time together out there. So that was the closest to vacation that we typically end up getting. When we're done here, we'll probably be heading to Florida for the winter.
Yeah.
Not sure if we'll be looking to create another Ignite the Spark there, or it seems like right now we're getting connected to folks who may want us to do some youth entrepreneurship stuff
Oh
down there.
wow.
So we
Okay.
may schedule Ignite the Spark for Virginia, because we know that's being worked on there
Awesome.
for next year. So that's, we're very project oriented. A lot of times it depends on where we feel the good Lord is leading us.
Yes. Yes. Well.
We've had times where thought we were going one direction, and all of a sudden, boom, we're going in.
Oh yes. I do know that. So I have to ask. We're at Virginia. I've been to Virginia. So what part of
um,
Virginia?
well, one of our partners lives in Reedville, Virginia, which is right out on the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
he's got a lovely spot out there, and actually, he's looking at a campground that's been mostly abandoned right there near where he lives. It's right on the
Wow.
water. I'm like, okay, so it's time to get
Yeah.
a guester person.
Wow. That'd be perfect. I mean, oh, how far is that? Virginia Beach is where I've been. I wonder how far that is.
Virginia Beach from Reedville is somewhere between 2 and 3 hours
That's
apart.
quite a ways
Yeah,
then. Okay.
yeah.
So, I
Mhm.
mean, I like Virginia. I mean, that never had, that was first time being in Virginia. So when you
Uh,
go to Florida, do you move around in Florida or do you have a certain place you like or?
well, again, it ends up being a lot based on potential
Would
projects,
you? Okay.
and also who are the people that we know there who can kind of connect us. Because I'll tell you, campgrounds in Florida now, it's getting hard to find something that doesn't cost you like $1,500 or $2,000 a month to park in.
Wow.
It's gotten really crazy. The pandemic, a lot more people bought RVs because
Yeah.
they saw it as a safer way to travel,
Right. Right.
and things have just exploded down there. So,
It's amazing.
we actually have a friend who's hosted us a couple of times over near Cape Canaveral. Actually,
Oh,
got
okay.
to watch rocket launches on the
Uh-huh.
7th.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
And then, but we really like the Tampa Bay area, and we're starting to really grow a
Sure.
network there. So St. Pete, Tampa,
Yes. Absolutely.
Clearwater, those areas work out well. And that seems to be where there may be opportunities to do some young entrepreneur stuff
That is
next
an
week.
awesome area. I mean, last year, Sherman went down there in January, and it did not want to come back to Nebraska in January from being down
No.
there. They thought it was cold. It's like, oh, this is not cold. Come back to, I mean, we came back to zero, and then it was like 60 there. It's like, yeah, this is chilly, but this is nice compared to when you've been down to zero. So,
For
no,
sure.
thank you. So Cheyenne, so tell us about your podcast.
Our podcast, it is called You Are the Miracle.
Okay.
And the reason that we named it that is because, one of the things that we are truly disturbed by is that there, as much as we've been Christian all our lives, we have a concern that somehow there's too many Christians who have been lulled to sleep thinking that what they need to do is to sit on their hands and wait for Jesus to return.
Yes.
And we keep saying, Jesus didn't say, wait for me. He said, follow me. And so that's what we try to do, is spotlight people who are not on the bleachers. They're on the playing field. They figured out what kind of gifts they have to give to the world, and they're doing it. And those are, because we want to inspire more people to get off the bleachers, because it's crazy. One of our core beliefs is that, we were all born with a piece of a super puzzle that we were designed to create, that nobody else could create that piece of the super puzzle.
Yes.
And if we all were about creating that piece and putting them together into this big super puzzle all over the world, then we would be living in a world with plenty of health and wellness, plenty of prosperity, and plenty of peace for all of us. And the fact that we're not in that world is a really good indicator of the number of us who are still sitting on our piece of the puzzle.
Yes. I love the way you put that. That is I love that. That is so great. I mean, it's just, it is the piece of the puzzle. And when you say, like God will provide, it's like God's not going to provide. You just sit there. You have to do. So,
That's it. What's the acronym for ACT? ACT. Action changes things.
Yes, exactly. You have to take the action. That is for sure. So, so how long have you been doing your podcast?
Oh my goodness. It's actually been through several iterations. Funny story. It started 5-6 years ago. And at that time, we called it the Live Your Song podcast. And the only reason that it came to pass was because we have a good friend here in the Raleigh-Durham area. And he's an African-American gentleman, and he created an organization called Every Dot Black. And his whole purpose for it is to promote entrepreneurship in the African-American community, because he feels it is the only path to economic independence. And so he promotes that. And he had come to my husband and I and said, well, aren't you going to be a member of my organization? And I looked at him and I said, do we qualify?
I would have said the same thing, yes.
And he laughed and he said, I really want this organization to become an organization that is diverse, of people who really believe that entrepreneurship is a good thing for the Black community. And I said, I'm on board.
Yes.
So shortly after we came on board, he had an opportunity to work with somebody out of St. Louis who had a radio station, and he wanted to take a bunch of Every Dot Black members and put them on his radio station.
Wow.
And so, Jimmy Davies is his name. And so he had this contest to, in his membership, for people to put together a sample podcast episode.
Right.
And then he was going to see, out of the so many slots that he had, people were going to get to vote on who would be on the station. And it was just funny because it ended up being, there was one of the slots was being competed on by me and this one other gal who did not look like me. And it was just funny because everybody liked both of our podcasts so much. Jimmy went back and convinced the owner to let us both have one. So
that's so awesome. That is great.
That's how we got started. And, it's gone through different names depending on what was happening in our world. We've called part of them were called Small Business Power, because, again, we believe in the power of small business owners to create the positive change. And now it's You Are the Miracle, because we're wanting everybody to understand you were designed as a miracle by our Creator. So let's figure out what you're here to do.
Yes, that is so awesome. And I can understand that. My podcast and everything has changed names many times. And it just says the journey. It just does. And it's like, what was I thinking when that first name? It just didn't fit anymore. So, no, I love this. So Sheyenne, before we end the podcast, anything else you would like the audience to know?
Well, definitely just, to please search yourself and see what kind of a miracle, what kind of a piece that you are designed to bring to the world. We the first page of our book is actually a quote from our Buckminster Fuller.
Okay.
And basically, to paraphrase, he said, "You can't create change by fighting the existing reality.
True.
Instead, we need to build new systems that make the old systems obsolete." And that's what we're all about.
Yes.
And the only way those new systems will ever come about is for all of us to be asking that question. What
Yes.
is the miracle that I have to bring? What is that unique gift, that unique story, that uniqueness that nobody else on the planet can do? Because you're the only one who's experienced what you've experienced.
Awesome. I love that. That is what a way to end the podcast. That is so great. Um, well, thank you for joining me on the Dreamcatcher podcast, and
Thank you.
I look forward to having you back as things progress. I would love to have you back on follow up podcasts if that would work, and I think I join you on your podcast coming up pretty quick too.
Yeah, yep. If it's not next Sunday, it's the Sunday after. I think it might be next Sunday.
I think
So,
it is next.
we're just having fun.
Yes, yes, I look forward to that very much. So, but until Sunday, take care, and thanks again for being the guest. And
Thank you.
and
Appreciate the opportunity.
thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
I will.